So I'm going to hand over to Lars. We're going to talk about the value of LMS best practices.
Thank you, Steve, and welcome to this session. Thank you very much for attending. I'm really keen to share with you a whole range of ideas and thoughts as to how we see the world of learning technology evolving, and not just that, how it's responding to the wider changes in the market. So allow me to introduce you to TOTRA, for those who aren't aware. We're an organisation that was born in 2010. We were born in Wellington, New Zealand and Brighton, UK, so truly global from the outset, and now have a footprint that really spans the globe. 1,500 organisations are using TOTRA, a learning management platform, in some regard, in many different sectors, with over 20 million users worldwide receiving their learning and development and supported in many ways. Through a partner network, primarily, that is global in its own right, around 80 partners around the world, which really helps specialise and customise and configure the solution to meet a specific need. And I think that's one of the threads that we've come across today, has been around the need to be adaptable, to be personalised, and to really deliver value to the organisation, to teams that we work with, and us as individuals when it comes to our learning and development. So just to give you an indication of the type of organisations that use TOTRA, the whole plethora of sectors that are represented, very strong in healthcare and in public sector. TOTRA is used in the federal government in the US as a preferred supplier, but also here in the UK, the NHS, pretty much half the NHS staff base, which is 700,000 people, will be getting their learning and development through TOTRA. The good news is that the support that these organisations get is deliberately focused, supported by partners that can leverage the full code base of TOTRA to deliver a really remarkably tailored solution. You can learn more about many of these online on our website. As Steve said, very open about the success stories and use cases of learning management. I'm sure you'll find an example that is going to be very close to your own needs as an organisation if you were to explore that in more depth. So, moving on, let's have a reflection about what it is we're here to do as learning professionals and supporting people at work. Well, I think we probably would all agree that we want our people to perform at their best, and to do that in consistent ways and to continually improve. And we can sort of summarise that as empowering people to do their best work. And to do that in a world which is changing so rapidly is increasingly. So how do we leverage best practices to do that? And how do we deliver on the technology that will support that? One thing that I think we can also agree on is that the world is changing at really rapid rates and exponentially. This is a curve that keeps going up, and it is challenging all of our practices. So a amusing shark coming into frame seems to allude to we are in danger of our common and traditional practices being disregarded, ignored, and maybe becoming irrelevant. Now, that's only going to be the case if we don't take stock of what we're doing and start to adopt more aligned practices. But as we discussed a little earlier in our sessions, that being able to deliver content more quickly using technologies like AI may only be a faster way to produce garbage in and garbage out. So we need to be careful about how we adopt these technologies. Exponential change does reinvent the workplace. The pace at which change is impacting us is only going to accelerate. So in terms of reinventing that workplace, we can see that technologies such as generative AI have a place, and they will be able to deliver the coaching that we were talking about earlier in the day. Will be able to capture expertise as digital twins. Being able to capture that essence of our subject matter experts out in the workplace is a real opportunity now. And not least, it's already there with influencers out in the wider world. Those images that you can see behind me are fully virtual, completely generated by AI. Everything they do, everything they say, everything they sing, everything you see on video is completely virtual. And so brands are beginning to harness this technology already. We can harness that technology to make available expertise at scale in ways that we couldn't do before. And as we can also see that beyond digital twins, there are other types of applications of Gen AI that we can apply, which are co-pilots. So being able to capture knowledge repositories that we have in our organisations and to deliver that as a coaching and guide, that mentor on the side. So there's real application there, particularly if we attach that to agents that can deliver and do things on our behalf, then this will lead to dramatic improvements in productivity if we focus on performance and see it as a redesign of how the job is structured. And in terms of jobs, that cycle is only accelerating. So if you think about that earlier example of influencers, well, in many respects an influencer is a job role. When do we think that came about? That was 7 years ago, maybe? And now we've got fully AI versions of those, so that's the job cycle could arguably be coming down to its close, or it's certainly radically being changed. That's true of lots of other job roles. If we, that life cycle, that half-life is shrinking to less than 5 years. And the recent WEF report just come out in 2025, they're looking ahead into 2030, that's 5 years. There are dramatic changes expected in terms of how job roles will shift. I'd encourage you to take a closer look at that report. So all of this leads to reskilling cycles accelerating. That means our job as learning professionals is only going to become more and more important to the future competitiveness of our organisations. We all need to be learning organisations when our entire sectors are being reinvented in front of our eyes, pretty much at a visible pace. Now, we can learn more about exponential change. There's a great book I would like to recommend you all to take a look at. It's written by Azim Azhar. He's summarised the impacts and all of those that are shaping the world we are very much living right now. We're probably at that knee bend of that exponential curve and only going faster. So how do we really respond to that? We're going to need to understand the broader abstract framework around that, how that works. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at this. It will very much help you inform and cope with understanding what is only rapidly accelerating change. Okay, let's take a moment to think again about what good looks like. So imagine, if you will, what does a unified and personalised workplace experience for everyone look like? So let's bring forward some of the thoughts we had from earlier sessions around being personalised, being adaptable, having easy access, being able to coach at scale. But if we start to think about what that looks like as a flow or a system and some characteristics of what we need to see as part of the overall workplace experience that individuals have, then I'd like you to think around a cycle here. So first of all, can everybody in your organisation say yes, that they have access to the right resources to complete their job? So do they understand how to use the tools? Do they access the right information at the right time to the right people at the right time? It's common, there's lots of barriers to that. Many people do not understand how to use the tools that they have at their hand to maximise their productivity and performance. So some of these areas are important areas to look at closely. So that's point one. Have you got access to the right resources? The next one is about constructive, timely feedback. And we touched on that earlier. In fact, Andy raised that as a critical factor, is constructive, timely feedback is in the moment. It's regular, it's course correction as you go, because without that, if you're relying on very lumpy 6-monthly, quarterly or yearly appraisal type information in terms of performance feedback, you're not really going to get the benefit flowing through either to the individual or your teams or to the bottom line for the organisation. So constructive, timely feedback is an essential element of that. Do you have that in your organisation? Another step or consideration is, are you clear about what you need to be doing? So this is about the objectives and goals that you're operating to. and in an environment which is changing all of the time and in unexpected ways, that becomes even more challenging for people to understand. Are they focusing on the right things? So do you know what to do? Can you honestly say that every individual in your organisation can say yes to that? Then we can also look at the opportunity for upskilling. That is a key thing when upskilling cycles are accelerating. But we need to look at that down to the individual and how collectively teams are being shaped to be skilled. We do need to say, are we clear about opportunities for improving our skills for each individual, and is that personalised to that individual's needs? And then another step is the management culture. Michael touched on this when we were talking about coaching and the importance of coaching that came up in the survey before. Is the management culture one that is a more coach-mentor style? Are individuals feeling valued and listened to by their manager? Because if that's not the case, then there's going to be issues around maybe confidence, maybe there's issues around psychological safety in the organisation, and that simply translates to poorer performance or substandard performance across the board. So all of these elements underpin a successful, high-performing team environment. So each individual in your organisation who's part of a team, who's and then collectively part of your whole organisation, if you can get answers to all of these steps to ensure that they're positive, then we will have cohesive teams populated by high performers and continually improving performers. So I suggest that if you as learning professionals in your own organisations can take a deeper dive into each of these areas, you'll find opportunities to make really concrete improvements. So I think let's take a moment now to see what you as individuals might think are the key areas where you might have the biggest gap in your organisation. So we've got the Mentimeter up. I think hopefully you all know how to operate this now, so I'm very keen to see how you might focus on where the biggest gaps are in your organisation. Now I think you might be able to select more than one, or is it just one from many? It's more than one? It's three. It's three. Okay, great. You've got the opportunity to select three. So I'm keen to know, is it access to the right resources? Is it constructive, timely feedback? Is it clarity around objectives and goals? Is it upskilling opportunities? Is it the management culture of being valued and listened to? You know, which of these are the key elements that you need to focus on most in your organisation? So has access, so the right resources is the top element here in terms of the respondees. It's changing a little in real time, which is fantastic. So access to the right resources. Well, this is interesting because in many respects, this is low-hanging fruit for us as learning professionals. We should be able to understand what those tools are, where that knowledge sits, and where the people are with the knowledge sits. So if we can make it our business to be able to get closer to where the gaps are and understand what people are struggling with, then we can make quite powerful differences to the everyday work experience that people have. So it doesn't really surprise me that that is the top one in the list here, but it's also good news that you can, if you focus in that area, you'll make the most dramatic difference. Constructive, timely feedback, that's a close second, and I think that's had a lot of focus over the past 3, 4, 5 years now to start to think differently about how feedback is captured and how that's evidenced and delivered back to individuals. So I think that's really quite critical. Clarity around objectives, that's very much closely linked, so I can understand that being a common challenge. Interesting that being upskilled, that's sort of lower down the list. Maybe it's because it's a newer element here to try and understand what that skills mix is and how to manage skills. I'll come on to that in a bit. And then valued and listened to is also in lockstep with upskilled, and being part of a cohesive team is really sort of our end goal really, but I can see why if you don't have that clarity and can't see that happening in your business, then quite rightly, you know, if that isn't in place, then you're missing a trick in terms of overall performance improvement and competitiveness. Right, well thank you for your responses, that's really quite heartening to see. All right, moving on. skills-based organisation. Andy touched on this earlier, and we did in our earlier discussion, that we need to be thinking about how our organisations are organised, because with rapid change, with rapid iteration, it's really essential that we become much more adaptable to these changes. That requires more fluid structures across the organisation. It requires an ability to focus on skills rather than the job definitions itself, which can be a little bit more rigid and date much more rapidly these days than they used to. But being able to uncover skills definitions that are meaningful to you and your organisation is still a challenge out there. There's no real common standards that we can really hang our hat on necessarily, but it's important to start attempting to define those very flexibly, because that allows you to understand better what your people are skilled in, which may not actually correlate to the job role definitions that you may have right now. So embarking on that journey will enable you to identify opportunities for people to move, to have better talent mobility across the organisation. And that will lead you to a more unified talent experience. Essentially, that workplace experience that ties everything together, that brings the organisation together in ways that perhaps currently is a little bit too siloed. Now, to do all of that requires a shift in your approach to technology. So technology itself can be quite siloed. It sort of mirrors your structures inside your organizations. I really would like to encourage a deep audit of the HR technology that you have in your organization. That will include a learning management system, the other systems that sit around that, and also how that gets integrated across the board, how your systems that each of your divisions, departments use, how they leverage and support performance and learning and development. All of that is an opportunity now, but it does need to be deeply integrated, because if you can take that approach and have a more integrated but fluid mechanism for achieving that, then it becomes a strategic enabler for supporting change and for anticipating change, or being much more proactive, not just reactive. And that's how your organisation becomes more competitive and stays competitive in a changing world. So, stepping into the thought experiment and an offer to you to take a look at your organisation in the form of a maturity model. So this maturity model is our attempt to give you a framework by which to think about how you're approaching learning and development within your organisation and the opportunity for improvement, and to create an action list of ways to identify opportunities for positive change. So there will be a Mentimeter on this. In fact, here's a Mentimeter. There will be a Mentimeter here, but I'm going to take you through each of these levels to give you a bit more context around what each of these steps are. So we'll start at the bottom, and we've talked on this a little already about compliance, and talking about how most of us in organisations, but pretty much any organisation, has to contend with regulations of some nature just to be in business. But also, if you in particular sectors, then you'll have mandatory sector-specific regulation that you'll need to address. And indeed, that landscape is a moving feast, and arguably in today's world, it's as much about regulations coming in as regulations changing and maybe even coming down, but depending on where you are in the world. But that just creates change, and that creates a need for that to be communicated. That needs to be shaped into proper behaviours at scale in your organisation so that you stay compliant. But what we really mean by compliance, or what we should really mean by compliance, isn't just the tick in the box to shift responsibility. It's actually about, are we performing collectively in ways that maximises our chances to be competitive and to succeed in our chosen goals. So I think we could all agree, and I imagine that you'll feel that you are doing some form of compliance, but I would also ask you to take a closer look at that compliance and say, are you really supporting behavioural compliance? And that perhaps needs different approaches to really drive that through at scale in your business, and different learning design approaches as well. So that's the compliance level. If you have a learning management platform in your organisation, if you are of any significant scale as an organisation, then you will have one of some nature. Then beyond compliance, there's really structuring your learning and development activities in ways that have common workflows, that have processes in place, that have ways in which you can identify and support sub-audiences within your organisation, so collections of staff or even audiences that sit just outside your organisation increasingly, whether that be suppliers, whether that be even customers, and how you support their learning and education. Supporting that in standardised, consistent, organised ways, you need a platform that delivers that. Well, the technology is there to support those mechanisms and procedures, but it's important that you've done the work to really design those effectively and to then leverage technology, flexible technology that you can configure and support in the way that your organisation needs. Now, beyond that, if we have these layers in place, then we have a good platform on which to deliver what I think is all of our aspirations. And when I speak to our customers around the world, then this is either an aspiration or they are there in being more learner-centric. And that really talks to us delivering that more personalised, engaging, aligned experience to people wherever they are in the organisation, down to their own individual needs, their prior experience, their performance to date, and really honing in on a development program that's going to deliver for them as an individual. But in turn, that supports their team and then supports the organisation as a whole. And this, I think, is what Andy was talking very much about and really suggesting we focus on promoting into our organisations much more. So being learner-centric is a goal. I think many organisations are getting closer to that, but it's still often a challenge. But new technologies coming through, or new design thinking coming through, or even actually older design thinking, but good design practices need to be coming to the fore and being utilised to deliver that much more effective and engaging experience. Now, if we can move to it being achievement focused, this is where we're being outcomes oriented, the skills are aligned, we have clarity around the skills that we really need to focus on, but also the skills that are coming. So that is where we are seeing that alignment between objectives, company objectives through to team objectives down to individuals. And achieving that gets us much closer to that cycle that I was taking you through earlier. And then if we achieve all of that, then we can actually arrive at a transformational level. And that's where we are now a learning organisation. We're operating at pace, we're being proactive, we're leading the problem solving, the innovation that we're needing to deliver to remain competitive in our chosen markets. And that's an aspiration that we'd all like to lead. So that's the sort of model. It's not an academic framework, but it is a great way to frame a conversation. And that conversation needs to be not just within the learning and development team, but it needs to be with your HR colleagues, your IT leaders, and your leadership, and to bring that conversation together, because that's where you'll identify opportunities to deliver real joined up solutions that will transform the way in which your organisation can operate. So let's have a look at the Mentimeter. Let's see where you feel your organisation might be at. Are you at the compliance-centric level? Are you at the structured learning level? Are you already at the learner-centric level, which would be a great place to be at this time? And it'd be lovely to see some achievement and transformative levels too, if you feel that your organisation is there. You'd be one of the unicorns, arguably. So, how are we doing? Okay, I guess no surprise. Many of you feel that you're at the compliance-centric level and at the structured learning level. That I think is the common levels that organisations are at. And then really interesting to see that a good number of you are achievement focused, so that's probably a testament to some of your connections perhaps with Steve and the VPS team, and maybe your use of TOTRA as well. So that's a good mix there. I think that does help you. If you took that model into your organisations to frame that conversation, then I think you'll spot immediate opportunities to make improvements to that compliance-centric level. So we move on quickly to, just a quick advert really for TOTRA, if you're not already one of our customers, is that we do have a unified platform that will take you to that more rapidly, I think, towards higher levels in that maturity level, but also take you into delivering that more unified experience. But essentially it's bringing those three legs of the stool of learning, engagement and collaboration, and rapid, in the moment feedback and support of performance for people. Designing that solution collectively is really quite critical to delivering these organisational level improvements at scale. So, just a reminder of the goal that we're looking for. On the next slide.
There we go. It's appeared, but it's behind.
It is behind
me.
you, yes.
So
okay.
yeah, in terms of the goal that you're looking for, this is really interesting, and for the benefit of the audience, I first saw you present this model at the back end of last year to your partners, and it's quite amazing how it's developed and matured in a couple of months. And was that your intent, to use the network that you have to feed back into your thinking? Is that how TOTRA works?
Well, that's how TOTRA does work. We have a very rich feedback mechanism ourselves in terms of the diverse partner network that we have around the world, and that they bring filtered views through from a whole range of learning and development activity and use cases across the world. So it's not one thing. Yeah. And it's not one thing because of their ability to apply very customized versions of TOTRA. When I say customized, it doesn't necessarily mean fully technically customized, but really deeply applied,
their business,
personalized learning and development platform solutions down to those organizations, which is quite a challenge. And it can be a challenge when you look out into the market where there's a predominant of technology that you as a customer organization have to fit the model that is presented. And if you don't, then you don't have a voice particularly. But with TOTRA you do. You do have a voice through working with partners like yourself.
And that struck me when I met the other partners at the event that you hosted. That variety of product that was being offered, but the core driver around the performance improvement, very evident design thinking that the people were talking about and the solutions that they applied. Indeed. So for the group here, I mean, I think we've got on the slide, how can they find out more about yourselves? I mean, you've come here given us your time, so how can we give you some feedback from the broader team?
Well, indeed. Another offer out to the audience here is to download a Learning with Impact toolkit that we've created that is a very practical workbook really to take you through an action plan of change to the approach in which you might tackle a learning and development opportunity. You can download that here with this QR code. It's free. You'll also find other learning and development professionals available to you inside our community. Totra.community is a place that you can go sign up for a free account.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Lars.